Kia ora. Welcome everybody. It's great that you've joined us again, and I hope there's some new people online as well as some people who've been to these sessions before. We'll get started with the evidence to practice session this morning, and I'm going to open us with karakia just to bring in the positive energies from all directions. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho, kia tau ai te mauritu, te mauri ora, ki te katoa. Haumie, huie, taekie. Well, kia ora. Welcome to I think it's the fifth, I can't really remember, sixth evidence practice session. It's great to see you here. Ko Cheryl Han, toku ingoa, here tangata tiriti aho. I'm with the Te Puna Aonui Business Unit, and really happy to be the facilitator for you today. In this version of Teams that we're using, you're going to only see the presenters and not all those wonderful people who are listening, but you can use the Q&A function to ask some questions for the presenter. So please do that during the presentation and hopefully your questions will get answered. We will have quite a few, so we'll get through as many as we can. Today, we're really pleased that we'll be welcoming Dr. Hedwig Eisenbarth from University of Victoria University in Wellington, and she'll be presenting for about 15 to 20 minutes on her research on the impact of intimate partner aggression on child behavioural problems. And then you'll have a chance to hear some of the questions and answers, and that's going to be facilitated by Dr. Alana Oakley, who's a principal advisor here with us in the Te Puna Aonui Business Unit Outcomes and Insights team. The Q&A will be public, and so anyone will be able to read it, just letting you know that. Just want to remind you too, we want this to be a safe and inclusive space. These sessions are going to cover difficult topics to do with sexual violence and family violence that some people might find distressing or disturbing. So please do what you need to do to look after yourself and take time out if you need to. We're going to post the links to the help portals and the places that you can go to find out more information and where the services are. So please use those. We'll also post the links about where you can find and access more research. Now I'd like to introduce Associate Professor Eisenbarth. So Hedwig did her PhD in psychology and clinical training in CBT at the University of Würzburg in Germany. She joined Victoria University in Wellington in 2018, where she's now the Associate Professor in the School of Psychological Sciences. Her research investigates emotional reactions, past emotional experiences, and personality traits that shape social interactions. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Hedwig. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Kia ora, Cheryl. Kia hui mai nei, tēnā koutou katoa, kia hui mai nei tēnei ahi. No tia mono ukutipuna no poneke ana ahau e noho ana. He pukenga ahau I I kura hine ngaro ki te herenga waka. No Hedwig tupu ingoa. Kia ora koutou. Thank you all for joining. Thank you very much for this invite and for the ability to share some of our team's work. And this is really a team effort that went into this. And more importantly, I need to first and foremost acknowledge the Growing Up in New Zealand study, which has been running for quite some time and luckily can be continued at such an important study in New Zealand. So what we're going to talk about today is the one aspect in this big study that we were able to look into, which is the impact of intimate partner aggression in the household that these young people grow up on the development of conduct problems in their earlier years. And this is a collaboration, so specifically with one of my students, Karina, who was leading that study during her master's thesis, Paul Joes and Johannes Karl from the Psychological Sciences Department, as well as Karen Waldy. So when we talk about exposure to violence in early life, we do actually know a little bit about how that can have an impact on later outcomes. And people have often looked at the how observing aggression can have an impact on internalizing symptoms, things like depression, anxiety, like trauma, the follow-up of trauma, basically. However, what we also know is that there is an increased risk of developing conduct problems in young children and young teenagers after having observed aggression. So what we were kind of interested in is seeing if this would be the case in this growing up in New Zealand study, but also looking into some more detailed mechanisms that we could potentially look into a little bit in more detail. So one of that is that even within the growing up in New Zealand study, there is already some evidence of the impact of observing aggression on conduct problems. But what we really wanted to look at is the intimate partner aggression. And we wanted to also discuss potentially how the parenting plays a role. What we do know from past research is that harsh parenting itself is one of those predictors of conduct problems. So from international research, we do know that intimate partner aggression, but also harsh parenting, are a bit predictive of the development of conduct problems. And so we would think that anything that happens in the household between the mother or primary caregiver and their partner might have an impact on developing those kind of symptoms. And of course, not all children develop those conduct problems. So we were really keen to also investigate protective factors in this relationship. So what could be variables in the context coming from the child or the mother that could potentially be a buffer to develop those conduct problems. So the aim was to investigate risk and protective factors for children to develop behavioral problems in the context of less severe intimate partner aggression. So why less severe? So this is to do with the way that the data are shaped. That the Growing Up in New Zealand study asks for less severe intimate partner aggression in several instances across the waves. But it also gave us the opportunity to actually do that, to actually look into, we know quite a lot about how strong and severe aggression has an impact on conduct problems in children, but we don't know if even less severe forms of intimate partner aggression would have such outcomes. So Karina asked us questions. What is the impact of early exposure to intimate partner aggression, depending also on the reporting person? I'm going to get to this in a minute. And what are the role of potential risk and protective factors? And what we looked into here, and this is just one subset of variables that we looked into in this very study, is maternal depression as a potential mediator, maternal warmth as a potential moderate, as a potential buffer, and child prosocial skills as a potential buffer of these effects, and harsh discipline. I have to admit that we didn't look into harsh discipline at the end in the paper that we published, but never mind. And we also looked at if it differs between girls and boys. So the sample, some of you might be familiar with the Growing Up in New Zealand study, the overall sample are more than 6,000 children. But what we were able to work with were the data of 5,298 children from that study. What the requirement was to get into the subsample is that the mothers were in a relationship antenatally and at the 9-month time point of the assessment. They were quite evenly split in terms of the gender reported by the mother. The partner gender was predominantly male, and the birth of the mother ranged predominantly between 20 and 35. And the ethnicity, and some of you might be familiar again with the Growing Up in New Zealand study having been oversampling for Pacifica, Maori, Asian participants. And so it's a little bit different from the spread that you would get in a representative general population sample. So the measures that were included, the variables that we looked at, that we were able to obtain from the data set were for conduct problems, the strengths and difficulties questionnaire subscale that asks about conduct problems. Then for the intimate partner aggression variable, these are the items from the interparental conflict scale that were used in the study that we were referring to. So push and shove, throwing things at each other, yell at each other, swear, and being angry. And those questions were asked to both the mother, the primary caregiver, and the partner. They were not asked in a directive way. So how often did each happen to each other, as you can see from those items. Then we used the maternal depression questions that were used from the PHQ, and maternal warmth was assessed with just one item. What we were drawing on just one item. How often do you do the following things when interacting with the child? I express affection by hugging, kissing, and holding him or her. So what is the structure, what we need to look at? So we had looked at antenatal and 9-month time points for the report of intimate partner aggression. And then we looked at the 2 years, 4.5 years, and 8 years time points for the conduct problems reported by the mother in the child. And so the question was, do these intimate partner aggression reports from the mother and those from the partner impact conduct problems later? So the first question was basically simply testing this model, and what we found here is that yes, it does. So these are the lines are representing the effects that were actually significant. Interestingly, though, the partner-reported aggression had dominant impact on the earlier years of the conduct problems, whereas the mother-reported aggression had an impact also into the 8-year time point. So first of all, we can say even minor forms of intimate partner aggression, as reported by both mother and partner, have an impact on conduct problems, and also later, even at year age, controlling for conduct problems earlier on. And so then the next question was, what happens if we think about maternal depression as that could be probably some factor that is elicited by intimate partner aggression, so the mother developing, potentially related to the intimate partner aggression, mothers developing depressive symptoms, and that these depressive symptoms actually have an impact on conduct problems. Again, something that we know from the literature. And so when we looked into this, as in this model, what we found is that indeed maternal depression seems to mediate these effects, but only partially. So what that means is that maternal depression can be an effect resulting from intimate partner aggression, and then also being related to the conduct problems, so causing that later, but there's still a direct effect. So still, even if we consider maternal depression, there's still a direct effect here from the intimate partner aggression reported by the mother onto the conduct problems at year 8. And then in the further next step, we thought, like, what is if the mother's parenting, and in this case their warmth, could potentially buffer that effect from the depression that the depression has on conduct problems, and that was actually not found. So what we did not find is an effect of maternal warmth of moderating this relationship, so that they couldn't contribute to alleviate those negative effects in this kind of setup. So overall, we concluded, well, there is definitely an effect of intimate partner aggression reported by mothers and partners on conduct problems in the child across the different years up to year 8. We also found that maternal depression plays a role, but it's not solely explaining these effects. Maternal warmth plays by itself a role. It has a role for conduct problems, but not as a moderator. Child prosocial skills did not have an effect either. I didn't show you the picture, but also those didn't have any effects. And the harsh discipline, which didn't end up in the paper, also didn't have an effect on top of the aggression that comes from the partner. And also another thing, as I mentioned, that we looked at is this model. Do these relationships differ when we look separately for boys and girls? And astonishingly, that didn't. So while there are higher rates of conduct problems in boys usually found, and also in the study, these relationships, how the aggression related to later on conduct problems, these relationships did not change between boys and girls. So what can we draw from this? What we think is still unclear is the role of maternal warmth. So we really don't understand that yet, how that plays a role in this context. We looked at it in a very specific way. We looked at it in a way that how it might be a buffering effect from the maternal depression to conduct problems. So that could be the reason. But it will be definitely very interesting to look in this in more depth. What is the interplay between maternal depression in the context of aggression and maternal warmth, and how does it play out for the child? Again, no moderating role of prosocial skills and harsh parenting above and beyond the intimate partner aggression, which is also again astonishing. So it just shows us how strong that relationship actually was. Only few gender differences, so not really any differences between the pathways. The strengths of this study are that we really have a huge sample. This is in comparison to most of the other literature, or like a lot of other literature, is that it's a very, very big sample. And also that we were able to look at less severe intimate partner aggression, and being able to show that even smaller forms or less severe forms of that aggression have such a strong impact on the child is, I think, quite key when we look into also what this means moving forward. Of course, there's also some limitations to this. We did not control for severe IPA, intimate partner aggression, so that might be something that we cannot do probably with that study, but will be important for other work in the future to see how what the interplay is there when severe aggression is brought into the picture. And the less severe IPA items, they really only ask about verbal and not so much physical aggression, not so much severe physical aggression, but there's no other aspects of aggression covered either. So it's a subset. We need to keep in mind what these items were that we can speak to. So potential action points, and this is really where I would rather want to draw on your expertise, because you might be working in these contexts and might be in a much better place to say what should we do with this information, and what are things that you think could be done given this, what we found here. But just to bring in some thoughts, and I'm curious to hear more from you, potentially engaging with children in a household of where intimate partner aggression is referred to, even if it's not severe forms, and maybe also trying to figure out what will be good ways to interact with the children in this context, and also because we actually asked those intimate partner aggression items, or we used the verb during pregnancy. So this is antenatally and at 9 months of the child. So this is early stages, and that's sometimes probably also not considered when we think about the impact on a child. Addressing maternal depression, of course, as a consequence of IPA, and I think that's probably what's happening anyways, but thinking of that as a contributor to this axis towards conduct problems is probably relevant to think about. And I think there will be probably many more thoughts that you might have, and also limitations to what we can do, or what we can draw conclusions from this study to work with as a first instance. Okay, so I want to thank hugely the Growing Up in New Zealand study, the team there who does all this amazing work to collect the data, being with the participants, meet them, connecting with them, to share all this difficult information with the researchers. Karina, who did the pioneering work in this project, and our lab that you see the picture of. And yeah, I'm very excited about hearing your questions and suggestions for this work.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Hedwig. That was so interesting. And there's already some questions coming through the chat, but if you have any more questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them. So first question I had was, would you be able to explain a little bit more about what sorts of behaviours are included in conduct problems, just in case people watching aren't familiar?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So the conduct problems items, they're all around being aggressiveness, and so it's also talking back. So it's basically only a few items, talking back, but it's also physical aggression, and it's a mix of not following rules. So it's very broad. It goes from really aggressive physical aggression to also being like almost oppositional.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. And as you mentioned, the study, given what was available in the data set, focused on less severe forms of violence, as you mentioned, verbal yelling and swearing, and physical acts like pushing and throwing things, as opposed to what I guess we call more severe forms of violence, and or things like coercive control or psychological violence. But you said there's been some research done on more severe intimate partner violence, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the sort of effects on children from those forms of violence, and whether there might be any differences between the less severe and the more severe types of intimate partner violence.
Yeah. So the studies that have looked into it's very few, but that have looked into the effect of more severe, the kind of what we think more of when we think about intimate partner aggression, the more severe violence, have found that children who are in that context do develop all sort of psychopathology, basically. So not specifically only one type, but conduct problems being one of them. So they oftentimes develop depressive symptoms, probably anxiety symptoms, some sort of externalizing, as we say, like in the broader context. So that's any sort of symptoms that have to do with conduct problems, but also are broader externalizing. So and that if you go for classifications, that would be oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, but also things like colors on emotional personal traits in children. So this would be in the conduct disorder context, the limited pro-social emotions, the kind of diagnostic criterion, if you want to look for diagnostics or DSM-based outcomes. And what we found, so in that context, if you would measure conduct problems with the SDQ, as was in the Growing Up in New Zealand study, that was found for children for the more severe context, that there is a higher likelihood of developing those symptoms. And so basically what we did is finding the same with the even less severe intimate partner aggression.
Thank you. There's a few questions around what other things you could have looked at, which it's possible that they didn't, they just weren't available in the chat, but I'll, so there, particularly why you looked at the maternal depression as opposed to risk and protective factors from both parents, or is it just? Yeah, it's the first one.
Yeah, I mean, that is clearly a great question. I mean, there's so many variables that we can look at, and the thing is, just from a statistical point of view, it's not so helpful to put a lot of variables in there. So we needed to choose, and we went for maternal depression because of that being, we know that there's a strong link between intimate partner aggression experience and developing depression on the one hand side, but also on the other hand side, depression having an impact on the conduct problems. So it made sense to look at this link, if that might be an explainer, basically. And the idea behind that being, so we always wonder why is that? So is it just like, is it the effect of observing this violence and that causing basically, or being related to a child being more violent themselves? Or is it something that there's the parent less available? Because it's also, we have to keep in mind, and sometimes people bring it up as a critique almost, like, well, but what about if the child is not in the room when that happens? So what is if the child never observes it literally, seeing it, but is just in this context? And then the question is, how would that then how would the likelihood increase to show conduct problems in the child if they don't observe aggression and then become aggressive themselves? And so one of the things that you can think of is a person, and it can be either or. So we actually, as you know, we don't know who was the perpetrator in this case. But in any case, that context of aggression being present, leading to more depressive symptoms in the mother, at least, could cause her being less able to respond to the child, and and being engaging in with the child in also parenting in a way that is probably containing something that could develop into conduct problems because of just the state they are in. And then this, and that for that reason, that increases the likelihood of that showing up. So we see that in some ways, we see that partially, but it doesn't fully explain it, which I think is quite astounding. That actually, it's not that it's only because the mother is less able to engage with the child, and for that reason the child develops those conduct problems. There's still this effect of these experiences of the mother during pregnancy and up until 9 months that still has an effect there.
Yeah. Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate.
Yes. So just to come back to the original question, because I think I wandered off quite a bit. But this was the reason why we picked maternal depression. But yes, it will be something that we should definitely look into. Also, the partner's mental health, also maternal other health variables, and also other parenting variables. That's always a tricky thing. So also we have to keep in mind. By the way, one big limitation is as well, it's all mother-reported data. So the mother reports about the conduct problem of the child, the mother reports about their own depression, about the aggression that happens, and the only secondary kind of source was the partner's report on aggression that was in here. So will be good to include more of the partner, and in later waves also the voice of the child. So from year 12 onwards, the child will report as well. So these kind of things are really crucial. So thanks for that suggestion.
How old are the children now?
They should be now, that wave 12 is now already 2 years old. So they should be like 14, 15-ish.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And this is kind of a similar vein, but so you chose to look at conduct problems in children, and some people are wondering why you chose to look at conduct problems rather than maybe some other problems like cognitive outcomes for the child, or whether the child has is neurodiverse or has ADHD or autism or other things going on. Is there a reason why you chose to focus on conduct problems specifically?
Well, it's probably because we are interested in conduct problems, to be honest. So we are really interested in how things shape up over time. So this is like, what are the pathways? What are things that contribute? Pathways as in not like a set path, but like what are developmental trajectories towards somebody who's then also older and potentially shows aggression. And we're interested in the cycle of violence. So why do people commit violence as an adult and with potential experiences from their early childhood? And so we do know, coming from the adult literature or research that we do know that people who show aggression when they're adult they oftentimes have these type of experiences. So for that reason, we want to know a little bit more, what are these mechanisms? How does this happen? So, and therefore looked into conduct problems specifically. There's definitely a great interest also in the cognitive abilities, as in development in that study. So Karen Waldy, that's her part in this Growing Up in New Zealand study. They, to my knowledge, have not yet looked at specifically the impact of intimate partner aggression on cognitive abilities, but that might be a really good and interesting thing to do. Yeah, thank you for that suggestion.
So turning to some questions now about the implications of this research for practice, which you touched on a little bit, but there's a few questions around, did you just in your research and when you've been thinking about these findings, have any thoughts around how your findings could be used by people who are supporting families in whānau who are experiencing family violence, and what it could mean for practice? And
I again have to say, like, I have no experience in working in this context, so, and I don't know what all the amazing people out there already do, so I don't want to like assume something that is already been done. However, we actually just recently spoke with somebody from police, and they were talking about how they try to train their police officers to be more aware of those children that sit in the corner when they get these call outs and they come into the room, and there's these children sitting in the corner being happily tapping on their like whatever and seem fine, and these are the reports that they put down. Children are okay. So I think what we can take from this is there is definitely some sort of effect that needs or should be maybe addressed, and I'm hopeful that it's already been done anyways, but I think thinking about that, that it actually does matter. So now having like the data there that show that it does matter. So it is important. It's not like a nice to have, I'm thinking of about the child who is in this context, but it does matter for their outcomes later down the line. So I think that is probably something, what that is and what it could look like. I would also bring that back to the organizations that work with people who experience these this aggression in their relationships. And the other thing that I really found quite profound is this the impact that it has it actually already is during pregnancy. So thinking also a little bit even before, like thinking also about a child, an unborn child, basically that's not yet there. So I think these kind of things would be something, I would love to see people taking on board, or can use hopefully this research also to argue for this is needed. So there's a need for supporting this kind of support for children in this context.
I think that's a really good point, because I think often there's a lot of focus on, I never know what to say, but maybe children who are direct victims of violence. And there's not always an acknowledgement that being like witnessing or being exposed to violence, even if you don't directly, even if a child doesn't directly see it, right? There might be sort of tension in the home that they pick up on, even if they don't see it directly. So I think that's a really important point. So there's a few questions. So there have been a couple of other longitudinal studies in New Zealand, famously the Dunedin and the Christchurch longitudinal studies. Do you know if either of those studies looked at similar things that as you've looked at, and if they found similar things, or if there have been changes over time, or as you said, with a more diverse sample that Growing Up in New Zealand had?
Great question. I'm not aware that the Dunedin longitudinal study had those items there in specifically, but I actually did. I have never worked with that data set, and I'm not aware of a published study. I might be wrong, so I should look into this again. But I'm not aware. I didn't come across when we did the literature search around this topic. I didn't come across. They do ask more broadly. They ask about some more other things, like they would have asked about early life trauma in some sort of other ways. So potentially not specifically in this way, and potentially also not with a mother and partner report. Both of these things. That's something that's really specific about the Growing Up in New Zealand study.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. I agree. Somebody said in the chat, by the way, that the children are 15 now. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you. So another question that's come through. Do you think that children in an aggressive family lose their affection and empathy, but can regain these when they get older? Do you have any thoughts around that?
I love that question, because it kind of gives us a little bit this idea about what could be done. Yeah. So if we think of the IA mechanism, again, this is guessing. I mean, this is guessing what we could, from the data, what could happen there. That these experiences contribute to a child developing this almost like a protective way of dealing with situations, basically learning to not respond to emotional context as much, or maybe actually acting out. So these other thing is that conduct problems don't necessarily mean that these children don't feel anxiety. So we need to keep that in mind. They can be anxious and showing these conduct problems, and then this anxiety is then potentially just leading to the acting out, to those violent acts. Doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have any empathy or don't feel anything. So that's something. So a subset of them might. Some of them might actually be in such a group where that is the case, where there's actually that emotional closure is that intense that there's even no effective empathy. But some of the other ones, they might actually still show that empathy. However, what we do know a little bit from international research, longitudinal research, is that even without some sort of intervention, some young people with these kind of behaviors, they don't show them later, and they can be totally fine. They don't show those behaviors later. They can be showing compassion and affection in that, but the larger group of those who show those conduct problems early on will carry them through long term, and so that's and then there is, again, that is not necessarily contradicting being emotional or being able to show empathy. It depends a little bit, because we know now that it's not, conduct problems is not one thing, and it's not like like a child or a young person who's just aggressive and not empathic, and there are different subtypes. And but we tend to look at conduct problems because they cause the problems. They cause the problems with their environment, and they stand in the way of building relationships that are healing. So these conduct problems are standing in the way of building good relationships with peers, and with then later on with in the adult world as well. So that's why we kind of look at those as an outcome.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's a really good answer. Thanks, Hedwig. There's another question. So about things that are may or may not be in the Growing Up in New Zealand data set. Someone's interested is the study captures whether the family or whānau were in isolation, or whether they had like parenting support at all.
Yes, great question. We do actually know a little bit about it. I'm always like, how much? We haven't looked at this in the study yet. We have in another study, we have included that as a variable, parenting support, if they took it on. So that's a great future direction to do this, especially in the study, to control for, to look into how that might play a role. Yes, can do that.
Awesome. So on that, are there other future directions for research using the Growing Up in New Zealand data set, which, as you said, is such a rich data set, that you would like to do if given the opportunity and funding and all sorts of things?
Yes, no, definitely. I think one of the follow-up questions just from this work is what happens if there's additional other traumatic events. So the questions that we can refer to, they actually broaden a little bit in other events that can happen to a child. Also losing a significant person in the family, or experiencing some other negative events. So kind of looking at that, if that adds to this, or if and how that might explain some of that more, because what could happen is also that this experience early on increases the likelihood of experiencing more traumatic events during the whole of the childhood, and that actually is explaining what's happening at year 8 or later.
Yeah.
And so we need to kind of look at this. And we were also wondering if are there like broader type of stressors to the mother, and if that is different. So is there something qualitatively different in the mother aggression, or in the intimate partner aggression experience compared to other stressors? And so that would tell us a little bit also about the specificity.
Yeah. Rather than like sort of other types of stress that can impact on parents and their relationship with their children.
Yes.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. And of course, I'm curious if anybody has some suggestions or questions. I've already noted some of yours down. We would be definitely also, because I like hearing from people who work with people who experience aggression, and maybe even with their children, if there's anything that you think would be important to know. So curious to hear if anybody has some other suggestions.
There's a comment in the chat that's, I think, similar, or maybe to your earlier question around programs, but someone in the chat says most of the research that shows that programs that work with younger tamariki before they turn 8 are the most effective. So I think that sort of speaks to sort of a sort of life course approach as well, and helping support children younger is better. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So okay, another. There's heaps of questions on the chat. That's really incredible. So another one is which you might be able to speak to is, or maybe other people who are watching could put in the chat. How do we identify households where intimate partner aggression is an issue? They wonder whether there tend to be low rates of disclosure around less forms of intimate partner aggression, probably less likely to report to the police, for example, because of things like normalization and minimization, which can make it really hard to, I guess, identify and help those mothers and families and children. So would you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think that's I mean, the disclosure or getting in touch with services is probably always the biggest issue in that context, and there's a lot of emotions involved, like including shame and guilt and stuff. And if it doesn't feel severe enough to like report, then it's even probably more like more difficult. I think, and I'm not sure how much that would be viable, but I mean, things like the moment that people, or while kids go to see the GP, basically, having that as one of the questions to be asked to the caregiver, are there issues in your, are there any issues in terms of in your household, and having that kind of providing some of that in this context might be helpful. And coming back to this early life that we looked at, like the time points that we looked at, there might be midwives or plunket nurses who could potentially just like get a sense of if there's something happening. I do think that it's really problematic that I don't know well enough what is possible there. Problematic could be to actually report that in any way. That's not probably what you want. You want to have the support for the child. That's basically what matters. You don't want it's not so much about the report necessarily, and especially if it's not legally relevant, which is a problem, right?
Yeah.
Then there's no point about reporting it. But then what could be ways of providing some information for caregivers think about your child. And I think that wasn't there. I might be wrong. Am I wrong? Wasn't there like a campaign, like a media campaign out on billboards that was speaking to this? Like, think about who's at home, like who's observing when you have that fight with your partner or something like that. Or or do I make this up? I think I saw something that was speaking really to this, and I found like this is really cool. And I think these kind of things, these might be really helpful. But again, we don't know. I mean, yeah, we don't know if they would be helpful, but potentially could do something in this.
I think there was, and Cheryl is nodding as well. So I think there was, yeah. And I think you're right that some sort of prevention sort of campaign thing is probably helpful, right? To help people rather than always focused on sort of response at that end, but what are the prevention things that we can be doing? Yeah. Cool. So we've got about 4 minutes left, so I think there's time for a few more questions. How do you differentiate between conduct problems that result from intimate partner aggression and behavioural issues from the child that might have been present anyway, to ensure sort of, I guess, support can be more specific? Yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing this up. Very important point that I didn't mention so far. So what we have to keep in mind with this kind of statistical modeling and finding these relationships is, of course, we only model, so we only explain what's happening in the conduct problems variable with the variables that we put into the model. So all the other things that we haven't considered are not in there. And so what is important to keep in mind is that we can explain some of that variation in conduct problems in the children. So being a lot of children not having any of those problems, by the way. So, but this, what the variation there is, how these children, these 5,000 something children vary in their conduct problems, that is explained significantly by these experiences. And we control for the conduct problems before. So what happens at age 8, what we see there as an effect still there, is controlling for conduct problems that were present before for whatever reason. However, what we don't do, we don't model other effects, and this doesn't explain the whole picture of it. So things that we do know is additional other risk factors, and there are plenty of them. Well, plenty. There's harsh parenting as one of them. And we that's the one we control for as one of the important ones. That didn't add to this picture though. But other things are, in some ways, there's a little bit of a genetic undercurrent as well. And other traumatic events, actually. So this is coming back to what I said earlier, it will be good and important to control for that. So all these other, or we only control for parts of these additional risk factors and put factors that could play a role in why a child develops conduct problems. So that's very important to keep that in mind. So we control for quite a bit. So we can really say at age 8, the effect of the intimate partner aggression early on age 8, that is controlled for other conduct problems before, no matter where they came from. And so they could be caused by other variables in addition. But there still might be other variables that explain that on top of it, and that we just didn't put in the model.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I think I think we might have to wrap up now because there's 1 minute to go, so I'll probably have to hand back to Cheryl. But thank you so much, Hedwig. This was so interesting, and there are a lot of questions in the chat, so I think everyone was really engaged, and I think I got to most of them. But thank you again so much.
Thank you all so much for asking amazing questions, and thank you so much for hosting this beautifully, Alana and Cheryl.
Great. Thanks, Alana. Thank you, Hedwig. I think a lot of the questions were about related to people's ideas about what else could be researched. So we'll definitely collate all those and send those to you. And we'll be making this video available, and some of the slides we'll make available for people who want to have a look at it, and your research will be published so people can read in detail about the findings. And we just really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge. It's so important for all of us to keep thinking about the impacts on children and young people from even lower levels of aggression that they're living with in their family and whānau. So thank you. And I know that many people are thinking about what we need to do to support children. And so keen to hear your ideas. If you've got some ideas too about future sessions, please let us know. If you've got any comments, you can email us on the relationships@punaonui.govt.nz email address. For our session next month, you'll have to get up a little bit early because we are going to be talking to somebody in the UK, and that's going to be at 8 a.m. So that's on June the 24th. And we're really pleased to say that we'll be joined by Professor Emeritus Marianne Hester from the University of Bristol in the UK. And she's been working for years evaluating the DRIVE project, which is an innovative intervention to address high risk, high harm perpetrators of domestic abuse. So we'll be talking to her in June. So please join us then. And thank you so much again, Hedwig. Thank you for your time, and thanks everyone for joining us. I'm just going to close with karakia. Kia tau te rangi Māori e, ki runga i ngā iwi o te ao. Humie, huie, tai kie. Message of bringing peace to the world. Thanks everybody. Go well.